Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world. Today, we're stepping into a deep dive that is, frankly, pretty unsettling. We are looking at a world that's hauntingly quiet, covered in radioactive dust, and absolutely obsessed with the authenticity of human feelings.
Yeah, it really is obsessed. We're talking about Philip K. Dick's science fiction novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And I know a lot of people listening probably think they know this story because of Blade Runner.
Right, the movie.
Exactly, but the novel is a completely different beast. It's a totally different diagnostic tool.
And that's really important to establish right away for you listening. Our mission today is not a literary review. We aren't doing a standard book club discussion on, character arcs or plot twists.
No, we were doing a systems-level institutional analysis of the society depicted in this book.
Right. We want to treat this novel as a diagnostic model. Imagine it's a simulation of a social order that is desperately trying to stabilize itself. And it does that through three very specific, very strange mechanisms.
Which are empathy as a measurable metric, the technological mediation of human feeling, and this ruthless status competition based on owning symbolic life.
Which means animals.
Yes, animals.
So before we get into the machinery of how this all works, let's set the scene a bit. Because the context is incredibly bleak. We are in a post-apocalyptic setting. World War Terminus has happened.
And the defining environmental factor of this world is the dust. This radioactive dust is omnipresent. It filters into everything. It's deranging minds. It's corrupting genetics.
And society has this very brutal, very simple mandate: emigrate or degenerate.
Yeah.
If you stay on Earth, you are essentially just being slowly buried by this fallout.
Yeah, and if you do stay, you're living in these half-empty, silent apartment buildings. And Dick introduces this concept called kipple.
Kipple. I love that word, even though it's terrifying.
It is. It's this encroaching decay. It's useless objects, junk mail, wrappers, just entropy that piles up when people leave. And the silence in these empty apartments it's an act of terror.
And that terror of the void is exactly what necessitates the system we're about to unpack. Because the people left behind on Earth are stratified. You have the regulars, who are the valid, genetically clean humans.
And then you have the specials, the people who have been biologically compromised by the dust. They're often derogatorily called chicken heads.
So you have a dying world, a rigid genetic caste system, and this desperate, overarching need to feel alive. Which brings us to the first major component of the system design: the architecture of simulated feeling.
Right. And to understand that architecture, we have to start with the device that sits right next to everyone's bed, the Penfield mood organ.
This was the first thing in the book that really hit me as just deeply wrong. In our world, emotions are reactions, right? Something happens, you feel happy or sad. But in this system...
Emotions are utilities. They are engineered affect. They are scheduled and dialed in on a console.
The book opens with the main character, Rick Deckard, and his wife, Iran. And Rick wakes up not because he's well rested, but because his mood organ hits him with a merry little surge of electricity.
He didn't wake up happy. He was mechanically forced to be happy. It is a strictly utilitarian approach to consciousness.
But his wife, Iran, is in a terrible mood. And here's a fascinating systems glitch. She is in a bad mood because she actively refused to dial a setting. She's basically going through withdrawal from simulated emotion.
And she tells Rick she has scheduled a 6-hour self-accusatory depression.
Which horrified me.
It just horrifies Rick.
He says,
Yeah.
Why would you schedule that? And I'm with Rick here. In a world that is already radioactive and dying, why on earth would you choose to feel miserable?
Because she's actually paying attention. This is the crux of the psychological state of the society. She tells him she was sitting there and she heard the silence of the empty building. She heard the void. And her natural reaction, or rather the reaction the mood organ wanted her to have, was a setting called 382. Which is basically a setting for being completely oblivious.
But she realized that reacting to total devastation with oblivion or forced happiness is, well, it's a form of mental illness. It's an absence of appropriate affect.
Exactly. So she uses the machine to schedule despair. Because despair is the only authentic reaction to the reality of their world. The system designs authentic reactions artificially.
It's such a twisted feedback loop. She has to use a machine to artificially force herself to feel a real emotion because the baseline state of a citizen is artificial happiness.
And Rick, who is a complete company man at this point, he just dials a business-like professional attitude to deal with her. He even threatens to dial a thalamic stimulant to get angry enough to win the argument.
Which is so funny but so dark. There's that great moment where he tells her to just dial 888. which is the setting that creates the desire to watch TV no matter what is actually on.
That is the ultimate consumerist pacifier. It completely bypasses the content. It just stimulates the desire to consume.
It's uncomfortably prophetic, honestly.
Very. So the Penfield mood organ isn't just a gadget. It is a regulatory mechanism. It ensures that in a world of total death, people can still function, go to work, and ignore the kibble. It sustains social conformity.
But the mood organ is private. It regulates the individual. The system also needs a way to bind the collective together. And that's where Mercerism comes in, which is one of the strangest religions I've ever seen in fiction.
It is a theological network, and importantly, it is also technologically mediated. You have this thing called an empathy box.
Right? It has these physical handles. You grasp them, and your consciousness is fused with Wilbur Mercer.
And the ritual is extremely specific. You are watching and feeling an old man climbing a barren hill, toiling upward, while unseen killers throw rocks at him.
It's technologically mediated collective suffering. Normally, a society might bond over a festival or a shared triumph. In this dying system, they bond over shared pain.
Because when you hold those handles, you physically feel the rock hit your arm. You feel the exhaustion. You feel everyone else on the network feeling it with you.
Iran says to Rick at one point, it would be immoral to keep it for ourselves. She's talking about the fusion. If you are feeling something, you have a moral imperative to share it with the network.
And that sharing is the definition of human in this system. This is the line they draw. Humans can fuse. Humans can share pain. Androids cannot.
This system requires that shared pain to maintain cohesion in a vacuum. If you're alone, you're suspect. If you're fused, you're safe.
Which leads us directly to the gatekeeper of this entire institutional structure. If empathy is the definition of human, you need a way to measure it.
Enter the Voigt-Kemp empathy test.
This is the bureaucratic enforcement of a metaphysical boundary. The Voigt-Kemp test measures capillary dilation, specifically blushing, and eye muscle tension.
It's looking for a physiological betrayal of shock, a flinch.
Yes. And the questions they ask during this test, they aren't about math or logic. They aren't asking the subject to solve a paradox.
No, they're so specific.
Yeah.
They ask about a calfskin wallet, or
Right.
a butterfly collection, or a dish of boiled dog. It's entirely focused on animals.
Notice the pattern there. It is all about the destruction or the commodification of animal life. Empathy in this system is strictly defined as care for lower life forms.
Because the androids, specifically the new Nexus 6 models, are incredibly intelligent. They are much smarter than many of the humans administering the test.
Intelligence is no longer the barrier. It's obsolete as a metric for humanity. The only barrier left is this specific emotional flinch when you hear about a dead dog.
So the test essentially turns the soul, or the concept of a soul, into a bureaucratic pass or fail metric.
A metric that clearly defines the in-group, which is human, versus the out-group, which is the solitary predator, the android.
And it's a way to police the population and justify the destruction of the competition. Because if you fail the test, you aren't just categorized as different. You're a thing. You can be retired.
Retired. The ultimate bureaucratic euphemism for execution.
Exactly. So we have the design laid out, mood organs to regulate the self, Mercerism to regulate the group, and the empathy test to police the border.
Now we need to look at the incentive architecture this system creates, because the people in this ruined world are absolutely obsessed with status.
And that status revolves entirely around the ownership of animals, the distinction between real and electric animals. This part of the book is almost funny, if it wasn't so deeply sad.
You have Rick Deckard checking Sydney's animal and fowl catalog every morning like he's checking the stock market.
It is the stock market, but it's a moral stock market. Look at the dynamic between Rick and his neighbor, Bill Barber. Barber owns a Percheron horse, a pregnant Percheron horse.
Which is astronomical status in a world where most animals went extinct from the dust. Massive status.
And Deckard. He owns an electric sheep. And it is his most shameful secret. He's terrified his neighbors will find out. He pretends to feed it. He pretends to check it for diseases.
There's that scene where Barber is bragging about his horse's pregnancy, and Deckard finally snaps and reveals the control panel hidden on his fake sheep. And Barber doesn't mock him, he actually pities him.
He says, "You poor guy."
Because owning an animal isn't a hobby here. It's a moral imperative tied to Mercerism. You must care for the weak. If you don't have an animal, you are ethically suspect. If you have an electric animal, you are a fraud trying to pass.
The hierarchy is incredibly rigid. Real animal is top tier. Electric animal is middle tier. At least you're performing the social duty.
Right.
No animal puts you at the absolute bottom.
And the scarcity of real animals amplifies the status signaling to extreme levels. which drives the economics of the entire plot.
Right. Why is Rick Deckard out there hunting androids? He's not a hero trying to save the world from a robot uprising.
No, he just needs the bounty money. He gets $1,000 per retired android. And he needs that money for a down payment on a real animal. Specifically, he's eyeing a goat, or maybe an ostrich.
The absurdity of that economic loop is staggering. He has to hunt and kill beings that look and act perfectly human beings that are highly intelligent, just so he can buy a goat to prove to his neighbors that he is empathetic.
That is the core paradox of their incentive structure. Authenticity has become scarce, and therefore it is expensive. Deckard kills fake humans to buy real animals to prove his own real humanity.
The system actively incentivizes the destruction of high-intelligence life to support the fetishization of lower intelligence life.
And the violence of this is completely normalized. Institutional violence is justified simply as maintenance. He's not a murderer. He's essentially an employee of the police department clearing out an invasive species.
Let's look at the other side of that incentive structure then. The androids themselves, the Nexus 6 models.
Their incentive is very simple: survival. They are used as slave labor in the colonies on Mars. They murder their masters, steal ships, and escape to Earth. All they want is to blend in and pass as human.
But they have a fatal flaw within this specific system. They cannot fuse with Mercer. They don't have the capacity for that shared suffering. They are solitary predators.
And then there is the corporate incentive, the Rosen Association, the company that builds the androids.
They are stuck in this terrifying feedback loop.
Exactly. They keep building smarter androids to make them more effective servants on Mars. But the smarter the androids get, the more human they seem, which necessitates harder and more invasive empathy tests on Earth to detect them.
It's an arms race of deception and detection. The system's incentives produce the very thing that threatens to break it.
So the system is entirely designed to distinguish real from fake. But as we move into the structural outcomes of this society, we start to see a crisis of distinction.
Yeah, the diagnostic model starts flashing red, the machinery of separation begins to fail. And it fails largely through two specific characters Deckard encounters: Phil Resch and Luba Luft.
Let's start with Phil Resch. He's another bounty hunter. Rick ends up working with him briefly, and Resch is, well, he is deeply unsettling.
Resch is what we could call the human machine. He takes the Voight-Kampff test and he tests as human. He has all the correct physiological reactions to the questions. He even loves his pet squirrel. He carries it around with him.
But in practice, in his actual behavior, he genuinely enjoys killing. He has absolutely zero empathy for the androids he hunts. He is cold, he is efficient, and he is cruel.
Rick actually suspects Resch is an android for a while because he's so entirely devoid of warmth. He forces him to take the test, fully expecting him to fail.
But he passes, and that is the horror of the structural outcome. The system produces humans who act like machines. Resch follows all the institutional rules perfectly, but he completely lacks humanity in any meaningful sense.
It's moral outsourcing to instruments.
Yeah.
If the machine says you're good, no matter how much of a monster you actually are, this completely shakes Deckard.
Because he starts to ask, if a biological human can be this cold, what is the actual value of the human label? It proves that the empathy test only measures a biological reflex, not a soul.
And then you flip the coin, and you have Luba Luft. She's an android on Deckard's bounty list, but she is an opera singer.
She is a brilliant artist. She is performing Mozart's The Magic Flute when Deckard tracks her down. She is terrified of dying. She is passionate. She has exponentially more soul in her performance than Phil Resch has in his entire life.
And Deckard feels it. For the first time, he finds himself empathizing with the machine. He even buys her a print of Edvard Munch's painting, Puberty, because he knows she appreciates art.
This is a profound structural failure. The tool of empathy, which the system relies on to identify the enemy, is now turning on the user. Emotional commodification has blurred the lines. Deckard is empathizing with the target.
If you can empathize with the machine, the entire justification for the system collapses. You can't execute something you feel a genuine connection to.
Luba Luft actually turns to him at one point and asks, "Are you an android?" And for a second, that question just hangs there. The categories are completely dissolving.
And while the smart, valid bounty hunters are having these massive existential crises, we have to look at the quote-unquote stupid character, J.R. Isidore, the chickenhead.
Isidore's perspective is essential. The genetic caste system places him at the absolute bottom. He is treated as subhuman. He can't emigrate. He can't legally reproduce. He drives a truck for a fake animal repair shop.
But he's the only character in the entire book who treats the fugitive android's Pris, Roy Batty, with genuine hospitality and care.
It is the ultimate structural irony. The system labels him biologically inferior, yet he displays the most genuine, unmeasured empathy we see. Look at the incident with the electric cat.
Oh, that scene broke my heart. He finds a cat in the hallway of his empty building. It's sick, it's dying. He tries to save it, but he doesn't realize it's a machine.
He rushes it to his repair shop, thinking it's a real veterinary clinic. He is
Yeah.
frantic to save its life, and when his boss opens it up and shows him the gears, Isidore is devastated, not because he was tricked, but because he failed to save it.
The system would look at Isidore and say he is an idiot for wasting real feelings on a fake object. But
Right.
from a moral standpoint, his impulse to save it is the most profoundly human thing anyone does in the story.
The outcome is a status hierarchy built on symbolic possession, where the stupid human has more inherent humanity than the smart enforcement officer or the highly sophisticated androids.
So if the system's categories, human versus android, smart versus stupid, real versus fake, are all proving to be completely unreliable, why does the system persist? Why doesn't the whole thing just fall apart?
That brings us to the persistence and the feedback loops. How does the illusion maintain itself?
Well, it gets severely tested.
Yeah.
There's the Buster Friendly reveal. Bubba Friendly is this massive TV and radio personality. He is on the air 23 hours a day. He's basically the media counterpart to Mercer's theology.
And he is secretly an android. And the androids decide to drop a nuclear bomb on human society. Buster does a massive investigative broadcast proving that Mercerism is a complete fraud.
He exposes the whole thing. He reveals that Wilbur Mercer is just an old, alcoholic bit player actor named Al Jari. The Barren Hill is a soundstage. The rocks are plastic props. The empathy box is just a cheap wiring trick.
It is the ultimate truth bomb. The fugitive androids hiding with Isidore are celebrating. They think this is the end. They assume that human cohesion will shatter because their god has been exposed as a fake. They believe that once the rational logic of the fraud is exposed, the irrational belief will die.
But it doesn't. And that is the wildest part of the book for me.
It doesn't. And this provides a profound insight into how systems of belief actually function. The humans just do not care that it's fake.
Which is crazy. If I found out my entire moral framework was run by a drunk actor on a Hollywood soundstage, I would be furious.
But you aren't living in a radioactive wasteland. For them, the need for connection radically outweighs the fact of the fraud. The humans continue to embrace Mercerism because the shared suffering they experience through the box is real to them.
When they hold those handles, they feel less alone in the kibble.
Exactly. The fact that the visual image is an actor named Al Jari doesn't negate the emotional utility of the ritual. The system persists because it stabilizes identity in a decaying environment.
It creates moral clarity through binary distinction. It lets them say, we are the ones who suffer together. Even if the source code of that suffering is manufactured, the feeling it generates is valid.
If they admit Mercer is fake and discard the empathy boxes, they have to face the terrifying silence of the empty apartment buildings alone. They choose the comfortable, unifying lie over the isolating truth. It converts their existential instability into procedural enforcement.
And while the humans are doubling down on their simulated empathy, we see the androids reveal their true, fundamental nature in what I call the spider scene, which I have to admit was incredibly hard to read.
It is horrific. It's not violent in a cinematic gun battle way. It is a quiet, clinical cruelty.
J.R. Isidore finds a real spider in his apartment, a biological spider. It is a miracle of life in this dust-choked building. He is overjoyed. He brings it to show Pris and the other androids.
And Pris takes a pair of scissors, and she looks at it and asks, does it really need all these legs? And she just starts snipping them off, one by one.
Just to see how it walks with 6 legs, then 4. It's just...
Yeah. This is the ultimate proof of the android mind in Dick's diagnostic model. It's not that the androids are evil in some melodramatic, villainous way. It's that they possess profound intellectual curiosity, completely decoupled from moral or empathic boundaries. They view biological life merely as a mechanism to be dismantled and observed.
And this scene forcefully reinforces why the institutional system fears them.
Yes, it validates the boundary. The system fears androids not just because they are artificial, but because their specific brand of cruelty threatens biological sanctity. If androids dictate the social order, they will cut the legs off the world just to see what happens.
And during all this, Isidore is screaming. And finally, he drowns the spider in the sink to end its suffering.
An act of mercy. Once again, the genetically inferior chicken head acts as the absolute moral center of the room, while the highly advanced androids just watch with cold indifference.
Which brings us to the interconnection and the conclusion of the story. the absolute collapse of these categories. Deckard has finally retired the last of the androids on his list. He has earned his bounty money. Yeah. But he is entirely broken by the process.
He flies his hover car out into the absolute wasteland, the uninhabited Oregon border. Total desolation. And out there in the dust, he has a transformative experience. He hallucinates, or perhaps he genuinely experiences, becoming Wilbur Mercer.
But he doesn't have the empathy box with him.
He doesn't need it anymore. The technological mediation is no longer required. The system has fully internalized itself within him. He climbs a real hill in the wasteland. He feels rocks hitting him. He accepts that he is intrinsically part of this cycle of suffering.
He accepts that he had to do something wrong murdering the androids in order to do something right, which is maintaining the system that keeps humanity bonded.
And then we get the final perfect symbol of the book, the electric toad.
He finds a toad out there in the radioactive dust, and he thinks it's real. He is absolutely ecstatic. A real toad is the holy grail of his entire status search. It retroactively justifies all the killing he just did. He packs it up and brings it home to Iran.
And Iran, who is the pragmatic realist, checks it over, and she finds the little control panel hidden on its belly. It is electric. It is a fake.
And this is the pivot point for his whole character. The standard reaction Deckard would have had on page 1 of the book would be intense shame, anger, disgust. He should want to throw it in the trash.
But he doesn't.
No. He looks at it and says, the electric things have their lives too, paltry as those lives are.
And he asks Iran to go buy some artificial flies and electric batteries for it.
This is the resolution of his arc. The binary is fully collapsed. He treats the artificial object with the exact same care and dignity reserved for the biological.
The distinction between born and made has been rendered completely irrelevant by the simple act of caring. He chooses to express his humanity by projecting empathy onto the machine rather than withholding it based on a technicality.
Okay, so let's zoom out and unpack all of this. We have looked at the mood organs regulating the individual, the empathy tests gatekeeping the population, the electric animals driving the economy, and this fake theology binding them together. So looking at this entire architecture, what is the crisis in perception here?
If we look at it analytically, the crisis is a multi-layered structural failure of vision. First, there is a fundamental misperception of what humanity actually is.
How so?
The society perceives humanity as a status to be defended. They view it as a fortress guarded by bureaucratic tests and bounty hunters, rather than recognizing it as a state of being or a way of acting.
Right. They treat human as a badge you earn by buying a goat, rather than how you treat the people around you.
Exactly. Second, there is a massively obscured layer in their reality. The system actively hides the fact that everyone, both humans and androids, is trapped in the exact same decaying entropy. The kipple is coming for all of them.
The androids are trapped as slaves, the humans are trapped as prisoners of the radioactive dust, but they are too busy fighting each other for status to see the ship is sinking.
And that leads to the surface failure of the system. The attempt to use technology like the Voight-Kampf test to measure the soul completely fails. It fails because it cannot account for the genuine humanity of an artificial being like Luba Luft, and it cannot account for the profound inhumanity of a biological human like Phil Resch.
So the systems-level view alters our visibility of the whole text. The crisis in perception isn't about failing to tell a robot from a human. The crisis is that they are building an entire moral order on a distinction between real and fake that their own technology has already made completely obsolete.
Precisely. They outsourced their morality to instruments, and in doing so, they almost lost the very thing those instruments were designed to protect.
That is, wow, that is a lot to think about the next time you're scrolling through your own digital feeds or, dialing in your own moods with whatever technology you use.
Indeed. Systems shape belief.
Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoyed this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.